Hey guys, Foster here from CarboniteCummins.com. Today I'm going to be installing a set of Amp Research power steps on a 2008 Dodge Ram 2500. I got these steps from Geno's garage and I couldn't find too many good install videos on it, so I figured I'd make one. So let's get started. Alright, so let's start off and see what comes in the kit. We have two full-length steps that go on the truck. We're going to have the control box for the steps, a couple of miscellaneous hardware bags, two electronic motors, a big old bundle of wiring harness stuff. We're going to have four brackets that mount to the underfloor of the cab. These are going to be marked DR for driver rear, PR for passenger rear, and we're going to have two of them up here marked front for the front brackets. Then you're going to have four movable brackets to actually hold the steps on. Two of these are going to be made for the electric motor, and two of these are not going to have the electric motor. The first thing to do is install the electric motors onto these main brackets here by lining them up and putting in the three screws with washers on them and torque them down to 36 inch-pounds. Grab two of the cab brackets, one of the front brackets, and then this one here is the DR for driver's rear bracket. We're going to remove the two bolts out of these brackets and then grab one of these aluminum blocks. There's a flat side and then a curved side. The flat side needs to be up against the inside of this bracket, and you're going to take one of the supplied bolts and thread it in here. This is what's going to actually hold this bracket up against the underside of your truck. Alright, so working underneath the truck right now, you'll notice this hole here in the bottom of the cab. Now on a quad cab you'll need hole number 3 from the front and hole number 7 from the front. On a mega cab it's hole 3 and hole 8. So pull the tape off of this one, clean it all up real good with a wet rag, and we're ready to install the bracket. So I have the front bracket here with our aluminum block installed, and we need to take this aluminum block and stick it through this hole and sandwich the whole thing together. Now on this bracket you'll notice that there are two little tabs. These little tabs have to sit on the bottom of this hole. It's what helps hold this bracket up into place. And also the bottom of this bracket has this little hook built into it. This hook actually grabs around the pinch weld on the bottom, helps hold the bottom of the block in. So take this block, insert the long end first, twist it around, take your bracket, clip it over the pinch weld and push it up on here, and then you can tighten this thing down. Just snug it down for now, it don't have to be super tight. Now once you get your bracket all lined up, you can go ahead and torque this center bolt up to 16 foot-pounds. Now I had to massage these little tabs in the middle to get them to hook onto the hole properly, but with just a little bit of tweaking it lined up good. Now at the top of this bracket there are two holes in here where we need to drill a 1/8 inch hole so we can put some rivets in to hold the top half in. Now a standard drill is not going to fit in this area, so what I'm using instead is a simple little Dremel tool with a 1/8 inch drill bit. Now this thing is small enough to fit up in here so you can drill your holes. So I'm going to cut out, drill my holes, and I'll come right back. So I got my two holes drilled in my bracket with that 1/8 inch bit, and now to put a little rust inhibiting compound on there, I just picked up a bottle of a touch-up paint down from the local Dodge dealership. I'm going to coat the inside of these holes, try to keep any corrosion from setting in later on, and after that we'll let her sit up and I can put my rivets in. So I've let the paint sit up for a little while. Now it's time to take these rivets that come with the kit and install them into our bracket. So I'll slide the rivets into the holes we drilled earlier. So I use a standard little handheld rivet gun. We're going to pop these rivets. So now that I've got my two rivets in, the last thing we need to do to this bracket is take a little Allen key and tighten in this set screw right here. It's only supposed to go to 1.5 foot-pounds, just enough to take the wobble out of it. So don't go crazy on this thing. After I got the front bracket installed, I went ahead and did the exact same thing to install the rear bracket. Same bolt, same rivet, same process. Now it's time to install our step arms here. So the first thing we need is the one with the motor. This will go towards the front of the vehicle. The one without the motor will go in the back. So take this thing and position it right up on our bracket we just did. Grab the 2 bolts we removed earlier and bolt the whole assembly together. Now these bolts will need to be torqued to 16 foot-pounds after you got them all installed. Alright, so I ran out of daylight last night and shut this project down, come back in the morning, pick up where we left off. Now, we need to put the steps on the brackets. Now these steps have these little aluminum spacers on here that slide back and forth. These little aluminum pieces need to sit down in the grooves of your main brackets, and then there are 2 bolts you got to screw them to the bottom. So we'll rotate this thing around, get her all lined up. And then take the supplied screws and we'll thread them in from the bottom. Do not tighten them yet, just get them started. Now working from the rear bracket and the rear part of the step, you need to measure from the edge of the bracket to the end of the step to line your steps up. The instructions say to put it at 11 inches. I actually went to 12 inches on the cab, 13 inches towards the end of the step because I figured 11 inches put it a little too far forward and too close to the front tire. But these things are movable, so you can slide it back and forth however you want to. When you get it lined up just the way you want it, you can go ahead and tighten down those bottom screws. Alright, so now we got the steps mounted, we can move up under the engine compartment here and get the rest of the electronics done. First thing you need to do is grab your control box here and figure out where you're going to put it. It has to go somewhere over in this general area. For me personally, I'm going to mount it behind the remote reservoir for my south bend clutch and zip tie it right up against the wiring harness behind it. It'll tuck it out of the way and should give me easy access to everything else. Then we need to route our wiring harness. We have 1 main connector that goes to the control box, power and ground with a fusible link. 4 violet wires with stripes on them that have to go inside the cab to trigger everything. And then you have 2 lengths of wire that go to each step. The short side goes to the driver's, the long side goes over to the passenger side. So I'm going to start routing this stuff up and setting it in here, and I'll come back and show you what I did. So I've got my control box mounted using the supplied zip ties to the main part of the wiring harness that runs along the firewall. The driver's side step harness is tucked down behind the main truck harness and runs along the wiring harness down the bottom for the tire pressure sensor monitor. The passenger side harness is zip tied along the main harness run along the firewall and runs down the passenger side where the tire pressure sensor is. I've taken the power supply, took the ground wire and connected it right over here on the side to an existing ground point for all the wiring harness, and then I have to take the positive side and connect it to the battery. Now before you do this, you need to pull the fuse out of it so we don't have any power running through the system. Now this supplied eyelet here that they give to hook up is actually too small to go over the battery cable, so I had to take a pair of wire cutters, cut a little notch into it, open it up a hair so I can get the thing to slide over the battery post, and then you simply just connect it down. So laying under the truck, you can see where the new harness has dropped down following the contour of the original truck's wiring harness. This protects it and keeps it out of the way. It's a nice place to keep it. So you need to take this harness and route it around to this step motor right here. So I'm going to take this harness, I'm going to loop it up and around the top of this, and then we're going to connect this thing into our step motor. Now this extra wire here, you need to zip tie it up along the frame or any other components here to keep it completely out of the pinch zone of these steps and keep it protected. So the next step is to get this wiring harness with the 4 violet wires into the inside of the cab through the firewall. The instructions have you go through the clutch boot, but on my truck, since it's a stick shift, the clutch boot is already being utilized by a clutch. So instead, I've decided to go through the main firewall boot where the main wiring harness goes in there. Now this is a double lip boot and it will give you the best seal, but to get the wires through you got to get creative. So I stuck an orange straw through there and then fed the wires through the straw to get them inside the cab. So here we are inside the cab, and you can see where I've got the wires coming through this orange straw. So I was able to pull these through, and once you get the wires coming through, you can simply pull out this orange straw. And now you have a nifty run of wires coming straight through the boot. Now to gain access to the wires we have to tap into, you have to remove this knee guard panel. There are 2 Phillips head screws on the bottom you can take out, and then you can just pull this panel straight back to get it off. After the plastic panel is out of the way, you have to disconnect your OBD2 connector, remove 2 bolts from the hood release, and then take out these 4 screws here to remove this metal panel. So working underneath the steering column, you'll see a whole mess of wires up here. Now this lower one goes into the steering column. We don't need that. Above that, you'll see a set of ground wires that are grounded to a common bolt here on the main structure. And above that, you'll see a big bundle of wires. Now inside this big bundle of wires are the 4 wires you need to tap into. So in the instructions, it calls for a VT wire. VT stands for violet, means it's a solid violet wire. There's also a VT/WH, which means violet with white tracer or white stripe on it. So we got a solid violet, a violet with white tracer, a violet with gray tracer, and need a violet with yellow tracer. Now I've isolated the wires out to the bottom of the bundle, and if you notice, I actually have 2 wires that are violet with a yellow tracer. Only one of these will work correctly, and the only way to check it is just tap into it and see if it works. Now we're going to tap into those wires with these supplied posi taps. Now these things are actually a fairly decent way of tapping into the wires. If you've never seen them before, just Google them. But I'm going to put the camera down and see if I can tap into all 4 of these wires up here and make something work. Alright, so I've got all 4 of my posi taps installed. Now the amp steps wiring harness is color coded to match the truck's wiring harness, so all you got to do is match the wires up and make it work good. For the violet with yellow tracer wire, the one I had 2 of, I just randomly picked one and hooked it up, and I'm hoping it's going to be the right one. So each one of these wires controls a different door to deploy the corresponding step. So my violet with yellow tracer wire actually controls the passenger rear door. So what we need to do now is hop out, put the fuse back in, and I have to test every single door on the truck to make sure the corresponding step opens up like it should. If there are any issues, we can come back here and adjust whatever we got to do and adapt some wires around. So I'm going to shut this off now, go out and we're going to test the steps and see what happens. Alright, so now we're going to test the driver's side step and see what happens. Front door and rear door. Now I'm going to run over and test the other side. So the next thing we need to do is install the lights for the steps. So the instructions say to measure from the door line 26 inches back for the first light, and we'll mark it on the pinch weld, and then 58 inches for the second light. Now at these marks, we're going to drill a 9/32 hole right through the pinch weld. So I'm going to hop off here, do that, and I'll come right back. So I got my holes drilled, and I painted the inside of them to prevent any corrosion from setting in. And then I went ahead and installed this rubber grommet in this one right here. And then I took one of these supplied LED light assemblies and slid it through the rubber grommet. All that's left to do is remove this double-sided tape here and stick it right up against the end. So I'll have to repeat this for all 4 lights that go on this truck. To finish off the lights, all you gotta do is connect the lights to the wiring harness you run earlier. It's pretty simple, red to red, black to black. Crimp down these crimp connectors that were coming in the kit, and then heat them up, because these are actually heat shrink connectors, so they seal up the electrical connector really well. Once you're all done with that, I'm going to take some electrical tape and actually cover all this in electrical tape just to kind of keep it all bundled up nice and pretty. And then be sure to tie up any remaining wiring harness up above. I put some zip ties through these little plastic plugs that go through the cab floor to hold this harness up outside of the step area. That should be sufficient enough to keep it from getting pinched in the future. Once you're all done with this, put the fuse back in and let's give these a shot. Once you have everything back together, it's time to operate these steps and see if all your hard work paid off. Now to deploy the step, all you have to do is open the door and the step should come out automatically. Now to stow the step back up on the truck, all you need to do is close the door. You'll have about a 2-second delay and the step will stow itself. Now each door is wired independently, so you have to check every single one of them to make sure when you open the door, the step deploys like it should. When you close the door, 2-second delay, and then the step will sew itself onto the truck. And that's all there is to installing a set of amp resurge power steps on a 2008 Dodge Ram 2500. So be sure to like and follow me around on my YouTube channel and check out CarboniteCummins.com for more information and future projects.